In the next few lectures, we're going to talk about GDPR. That stands for General Data Protection Regulation, and it's an EU law that came into effect on the 25th of May 2018. I get a lot of questions about this because a lot of people are confused. Do I have to comply? What is it? And so on. So we're going to cover all that in this section of the course. But basically, it is a directive or a regulation that is designed to protect EU citizens, well, European Union and European Economic Area citizens. Although you may be based in other countries around the world like the USA or Canada or Australia, it does affect you as well if you have visitors coming from the EU or EEA areas. So we're going to go through all this, but there's something I need to point out first, and that is I am not a lawyer. So what follows on GDPR is my understanding of GDPR. It may not be 100% accurate or apply to your own personal circumstances. Ultimately, if you want legal advice, consult a lawyer. In this lecture, I'd like to go through the 6 principles of GDPR. And these are the principles that organizations, including yourself, because you run a website, need to follow when collecting, processing, and storing people's personal data. The first principle is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. And all this means is that you're being very open and transparent about the data you collect, and you're not hiding anything from the people you're collecting it from. You should have a privacy policy on your website that tells your visitors what type of data you collect and the reasons why you're collecting it. The second principle is purpose limitation, and this means that organizations should only collect information for a specific purpose, and that specific purpose should be outlined in the privacy policy. Those organizations should only collect data for as long as necessary to complete whatever purpose it was. The third principle is data minimization, and all this means is that when organizations collect data from people, it should be the minimum amount of data that they need to complete the purpose. They shouldn't be collecting other information that they're not going to need for that particular purpose. By minimizing the amount of data they're actually collecting, it should keep your visitors safer, because if there is a data breach, then those hackers that have gained access to that data will only gain access to a minimal amount of data. The fourth principle is accuracy, and this just means that the data that is collected must be accurate. The GDPR states that every reasonable step must be taken to erase or rectify data that is inaccurate or incomplete. And visitors to your website have the right to request that any data that you have that is inaccurate or not complete is erased or fixed within 30 days. The next principle is storage limitation, and this really is quite related to the purpose limitation. In purpose limitation, it was collecting data for a specific purpose, and in storage limitation, you can only keep that personal data for as long as necessary. Once you've used it for its purpose, it should then be deleted. For some online shops, you ask the question, how long is it necessary to keep personal data? And they will argue, well, as long as they're a customer of ours, we need their personal data. But then you need to ask, how long after you've completed a purchase should you still be considered a customer? Is it once the guarantee is up, after a year? How long? Well, this is where you might need to consult a legal professional. The final principle is integrity and confidentiality, and this is all to do with the security of the data. It's a good idea for organizations to encrypt any personal data that they have collected, and that way if there is a breach, it is still fairly safe. So these are the 6 principles of GDPR. Obviously, I've simplified it down to the core, and there is a lot more in the GDPR, but for us, for webmasters, I think that's enough to get us going and to understand where this GDPR is coming from and the sorts of measures you're going to have to take as webmasters to comply with GDPR. GDPR is all about the rights of individuals. So in the next lecture, we'll have a look at what rights those individuals have or should have under GDPR. In this lecture, I'd like to look at the individual rights under GDPR. Bear in mind that there are already individual rights under the Data Protection Act, but GDPR strengthens those that already exist. So let's have a look at the 8 individual rights outlined in GDPR. These are the 8 individual rights, and what I've done is to create a PDF file with information about each of these, but let's just quickly go through them. The rights to be informed. Individuals have the right to be informed at the time you collect the data about the data you're collecting from them, how you're going to use it, how long you're going to retain it for, and who it's going to be shared with. Information provided to individuals should be concise, transparent, intelligible, easily accessible, and it must use clear and plain language. Privacy policies need to be kept up to date, and any new use of personal data must be included before you start processing it in any way. And what I've done for each of these sections is include a link which will take you to a web page that has a checklist. Let's just remove that cookie. If you scroll down here, we've got a checklist of things that you can have a look at. Okay, so the second right, the right of access. Individuals have the right to access their own personal data by making a subject access request, either verbally or in writing. You'll then have 1 month to respond, and you can't charge for this service. Again, there's a link there with a checklist that you can go through. There is also on these pages more information about any of this if you want any clarification or you want a little bit more detail. The right of rectification. This is where information that's being stored is incorrect or incomplete, and individuals have the right to have wrong data corrected and incomplete information updated and completed. All they need to do is make a verbal or written request, and again you have 1 month to respond. The right of erasure. You might also have heard this as the right to be forgotten. Individuals have the right to have their personal data erased by making a verbal or written request. As usual, you have 1 month to respond. The right to restrict processing, and this is in certain circumstances only. Individuals have the right to request, verbal or written again, restriction or suppression of their personal data being used. In other words, they can request that it's okay for you to store it, but it's not okay for you to use it in any way. And again, if you get a request, you have 1 month to respond. The right of data portability. Individuals have the right to obtain a copy of their personal data in a structured, commonly used format so that it can be easily reused by other services. In other words, you can get your information out in an easily read format that can be integrated into other IT systems. This means data can be copied easily from one environment to another in a secure and safe way. The right to object. Under certain circumstances, individuals can object to the processing of their own personal data, either verbally or in writing, and you'll have 1 month to respond. Individuals have the right to stop their data being used for direct marketing. And the final one, rights related to automated decision making and profiling. Let's just define those first. Automated decision making is where decisions are made purely by automated processes, not involving a human. And profiling is taking that information and processing it in an automated way to evaluate certain things about an individual. For example, if you apply for a mortgage, they can take your information. No human actually makes the decision. It's a completely automated decision, and you get a yes, you can have a mortgage, or no, you can't have a mortgage. GDPR applies to all automated decision and profiling. Under some circumstances, individuals have the right not to be subject to a decision and must be able to obtain human intervention if they request it. This will allow them to put their own point of view across, get an explanation of the decision, and to challenge the decision. But this right does not apply if the decision making is a contractual necessity, if it's authorised by law, or is based on explicit consent. So those are the 8 individual rights in a concise format. You can download this PDF in the resource section of this lecture. I do suggest that you go through and you look at these links, in particular look at the checklists, but there is also a lot more information about each of these rights on those pages. In the next lecture, we're going to look at the question that I get asked most: does GDPR affect me? And I think you probably will already have an idea of the answer for that one. So the big question, GDPR, does it affect me? In terms of running a website, GDPR affects you if you process EU residents' personal data as part of a business. Now, you might think that you don't process anybody's personal data as part of your website, and you may not collect it in forms, you may not collect it with subscriptions or anything like that, but the fact that you're running a WordPress website means that WordPress is collecting data. You get cookies That might include things like IP addresses, which need to have consent from the visitor. So whatever type of website you're using, you do have to consider GDPR as a necessity for you. The only way you wouldn't have to worry about GDPR is if you physically block EU and EEA visitors from getting to your website, and then you wouldn't have to comply. But everybody else is going to have to comply. And with WordPress, that is important. And we will look at that when it comes to the privacy policy section of this part of the course. There also have been rumours and a bit of misinformation spread about companies with less than 250 employees not having to comply with GDPR. That's not true. All companies have to comply with GDPR, but if you have less than 250 employees, then you are exempt from some of the record-keeping obligations of GDPR. So does GDPR affect you? Well, yes, it does if you have visitors coming from the EE or the EEA. The next few lectures in this course will look at ways in which you can become compliant with GDPR. WordPress itself needs to be GDPR compliant, and if you create your privacy policy according to the WordPress guidelines in the privacy policy feature of WordPress, then at least you'll have the WordPress part covered. But also WordPress plugins are often used to extend the features of WordPress, and these need to be GDPR compliant as well. Unfortunately, you're going to need to go through your plugins and look at them one-on-one and see whether each one is GDPR compliant. The ones that cause the most problems are things like contact forms or analytics plugins. For example, Monster Insight is a common Google Analytics plugin. That one is compliant. But any plugin that deals with registrations, email opt-in forms, with email opt-in you should be using double opt-in. That is where somebody signs up, they're then sent an email where they have to click a link to confirm that they want to subscribe. Things like comment forms, e-commerce plugins, security plugins which monitor IP addresses, and so on. You need to check all of these plugins and make sure they're all compliant with GDPR. That should be a relatively easy task if you go across to Google and type in the name of the plugin and then GDPR. You should be able to find information about the plugin and GDPR. So there we go, GDPR and Monster Insights, everything you need to know. There's that plugin, and you can find out that Monster Insights is compliant with GDPR. Let's try another one. Contact Form 7 GDPR, and there's a page here on Contact Form 7 and GDPR. So this will tell you whether it's GDPR compliant and what you need to do to make sure that it is. Let's just try one more. Yoast SEO GDPR. Yoast and your privacy GDPR, your Yoast knowledge base, and again you can find that information on there. So you should be able to go through all the plugins you use and check to make sure they're GDPR. In some instances they may give you some information to include in your privacy policy about what they're collecting or processing, and you should be able to get your plugins sorted out so that they're all GDPR. If you find that you can't find any information about a particular plugin and GDPR, then you'll either have to use your common sense and see what is being collected and add that information to your privacy policy, or remove the plugin and not use it. So essentially any plugin that collects visitor data, whether it's just a cookie or IP address or something, needs to comply with GDPR. One way that some plugins handle this is if there's a form that needs to be submitted, there'll be a little checkbox there that the visitor must check to agree their data being used and stored before they're able to submit the form. The submit button will be grayed out until they check to say, yes, that's okay by me. So those are the plugins running on your site. There are WordPress plugins though that are available that promise to help your site comply with GDPR. So in the next video, we're going to have a look at a popular one. One of the features of nearly every website out there is that it will set cookies on a visitor's computer. And there are GDPR plugins that will address just that one issue, cookie consent. In order to set a cookie, you need the visitor's permission to do so. So there is a plugin, for example, GDPR cookie consent plugin that you could install, which requests that consent, or at least it notifies them that cookies are being set on their computer and they have to agree to it to continue onto your site. But there are more complete solutions to GDPR, and if you do a quick search of the plugin repository, you'll see a number of different solutions. There we have that GDPR cookie consent, and we have another one here, cookie compliance. We have WP GDPR compliance. There's another one, GDPR cookie consent, cookie notice, and so on. You'll find more. The GDPR framework by Data 443, EU cookie law GDPR. So there are lots and lots of plugins out there that can help with your GDPR compliance. In this lecture, I'm actually going to have a look at this one, the GDPR framework by Data 443. The reason I'm looking at that one is it's got really, really good reviews and it's tested up to the latest version of WordPress. Lots and lots of active installs. So it's an actively developed plugin, and let's have a look at it. Let's go over to the dashboard. Here we are in the dashboard of my test site. Let's go to plugins, add new, and we're going to search for GDPR framework. This is the one here. Let's install and activate. Once it's installed, you'll get this offer up here for running the setup wizard, which I recommend that you do. Alternatively, you can ignore that and go to tools and then the Data 443 GDPR, which I'm going to open in another tab just to show you. This will then give you all of the options for setting up this plugin. So we have a cookie pop-up, consent, privacy policy, lots of stuff there. But what I want to do is I want to go through the setup wizard because that's the easiest way to start with these. So let's click on run the setup wizard. The first screen you get to is just an introduction, but one thing I would suggest you do is to right click on this WordPress site owner's guide to GDPR, open it up and read through that, or even save it. Let me just close that. And you'll see that there's lots of information here on being compliant. But let's go back to the plugin, click the Get Started, and the very first thing you come to is a legal disclaimer, basically saying that the GDPR framework does not guarantee compliance to GDPR. Therefore, if you are in any doubt and you think that you need to get a legal opinion, then do that. This plugin will do its best, but no plugin can cover every single different type of website. So let's just click on the accept. We know the risks. The first part of the configuration, it tells you about the plugin settings. It says that under the tools menu, there is a privacy link. In fact, it's not privacy link. So at the moment, as I record this, it's actually Data 443 GDPR link. But once you finish with the wizard, you can then go in there, we've already seen it, and modify the plugin settings. Let's scroll down a bit. And the plugin is now offering to create a privacy tools page. If you read through the text, the first major requirement of GDPR is that your customers need to be in control of their data. They have the right to view, edit, and request deleting of personal data, as we've seen earlier in the course. Note that this also applies to visitors who do not have accounts on your website. For this, we will designate a page where customers will be able to authenticate via login or email and automatically do all of the above. I do suggest you read this information here, but we're going to automatically create a new page for the privacy tools and click Save. We're taken to the configuration page 2 of 2, and it says the tools page has been configured. Right to view and export data. This is where you can decide what happens if somebody requests to view and export their own data. You can get them to automatically download the data, or what I prefer to do is automatically download and notify me by email, and then you'll be asked to put in your email address. And then right to be forgotten. What happens if a customer wishes to delete their personal data? And you have the choice. You can delete it, you can delete an email notification, you can anonymize it, and then you can also anonymize it and email notification so that you know somebody's doing that. And that choice is yours. Again, you'll have to put in your email address. I'm going to just choose delete data. When you're done, click Save to move on. And we come on to the privacy policy page. Obviously, the privacy policy is one of the most important pages to keep you compliant. And you've got two choices here. You can automatically create a new page for your privacy policy, or if you already have a privacy policy, you can select it from a drop-down list. If you choose to automatically create a new privacy policy, then you are going to get asked for a lot of information. So for example, it says automatically generate. We need to check this box to generate the privacy policy. Then we need to put the company legal name, legal location, data protection authorities. You're going to need to look this information up. Data protection authority website, authority email, authority phone, data protection officer. Have you got a data protection officer? That will probably be you. And then fill in that information there. And then terms and conditions page. If you have a terms and conditions page, we need to know where it's located. If you don't have a terms and conditions page, you can safely skip this step. If you're unsure if you need a terms and conditions, then read this article. If you have a terms and conditions page, you can select it from the drop-down list, and I don't have one on this demo site. For now, I'm actually going to come up here and uncheck generate. I'm going to say I want to use an existing privacy policy. I've already got my privacy policy there, and click on save to continue. And we get notification that the privacy policy configuration is complete. You can read more about the requirements for your privacy policy there. Let's move on to the next section, which is forms and consent. If we just go through this section, introduction, GDPR brings very strict rules for gathering and processing personal data. The most important thing to remember is that you need to have legal grounds for each and every type of data you gather and process. If you're not familiar with what this means, we strongly recommend you read this post from the guide, and I recommend you do read that. Under GDPR, all forms require special attention. You'll need to explain why you gather the data and what you're going to do with it. And if there are no legal grounds, you'll need to ask for consent. Note that your customers must be able to withdraw each consent they have given. Carry on down, WordPress forms. For posting comments and registering accounts, you'll need to ask your customers' consent to the privacy policy. If your site allows comments or registrations, the GDPR framework will automatically add consent checkboxes to the respective forms. And then withdrawing consent, your customers can withdraw their given consent on the privacy tools page that we created earlier. This site has contact form 7 installed, and it's been identified, and it says there we've detected that contact form 7 is enabled on your site. GDPR framework is compatible with contact form 7. Each of the forms requires either a disclaimer or a consent checkbox. We've created some tools to help you out, and then there's a link here, read about making contact form 7 GDPR compliant. So have a read through that information. There is also an option down here for custom forms. If you have custom forms on your website that aren't covered by contact form 7, then the GDPR framework won't be able to help you install the checkbox. You'll need to look for a programmer or a developer to do that, but you can read about integrating custom forms there. I'm going to uncheck that and click continue. And we're now onto the integration section, theme compatibility. The links to privacy policy and privacy tools should be visible somewhere on your site. A good place would be in your site's footer. You know how to add links to menus, so add that into your site's footer. One to the privacy policy you should already have, one to your new privacy tools which you've just created. And then there is a note down there that if you've had any custom development work on your WordPress website, to make sure from the developer that everything is GDPR compliant. When you're sure, let's click on the continue. And there we go, all done. Congrats, you've just taken a huge step towards GDPR compliance. If you need more information, it's all down there, but let's click the link to go to the dashboard. Everything isn't working yet as we want it, and I can show you that if we go to pages, all pages, you may well find your privacy tools page is a draft, so you might need to go in there and publish it. But even once it's published, if you go over to the page, you'll find that the page is currently disabled. So what you need to do now is go down to the settings inside the tools menu, data 443 GDPR. And we can go down the general settings, enable privacy tools, yes. If you have a terms and conditions page, you can enable that. Disable comment checkbox, no, we don't want to do that. Disable register form, maybe, or maybe you don't want to do that, I don't know. Email settings, put your name and email in there. And then we've got pages. The privacy tool page we created, we have the correct page selected. We also have the privacy policy selected. These were selected during the setup wizard. You also have this option of privacy terms custom page, privacy policy custom URL, and then terms and conditions page, we haven't got one. Let's go down, and we've got these other details that we selected during the setup. And then there's an option here, enable basic styling on privacy tools page, which I'm just going to accept. And then let's click on save. And we'll go back to the pages, and let's go back to our privacy tools page. I could have just clicked on view there. Go back to the privacy tool URL. It still says disabled, but that's a cache version, so let's just purge this page. When the page loads, we now have the top bit, which identifies you, your email address. This is an administrative account, and so the delete my user data isn't available. But if it was not an administrative account, but it was an email address that was known to the system, then we would have the option then of deleting user data. You can download your data as a table or as JSON. Just to show you what it looks like, if I download the table, it downloads as an HTML file, which then opens and also shows here session cookies and information about those, as well as my IP address. So that's the information on the system that is my private information that I could take away if I wanted to. So the Privacy Tools page is now working, and as it was suggested earlier, you should have a link to that somewhere, probably down in your footer, together with a link to your privacy policy so your visitors can access that page. The next thing I want to show you is the cookie pop-up, because a lot of plugins are available just to show you cookie consent plugin, which basically says a pop-up that appears on your screen saying, look, we use cookies, is that okay, yes or no? Well, this framework includes that as well. If you check that enable cookie acceptance pop-up, then we can go down here and have a link to it on the link on the pop-up to the privacy policy. We can put in a header, so whatever you like. Cookie acceptance pop-up comes with the information. This website uses cookies to ensure you get the best experience on our website. You can include a little more information there saying that if you accept, then that confirms that you are agreeing to the use of cookies as outlined in our privacy policy. And of course, we've put a link to the privacy policy on there. And then it asks where we want it. So I'll put floating theme. Let's just choose one of those. And then you can have the text to accept or decline the use of cookies. Let's just save that. And I'm going to go over to the website. And Pages now should have a pop-up. But again, we have caches and whatnot going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to an internal page, and I'm going to copy the URL, and I'm going to go to a new incognito web browser. So there's no history, and then I'm going to paste that in to visit the site. And there you see there's the pop-up there. The heads up, that was the title I put. You can leave that out if you want to. This website uses cookies to ensure you get the possible experience. That learn more will take you to privacy policy. There you go. And then you can accept or decline. So that's a useful pop-up to have. If we go across to the privacy policy, you'll see that this tab is populated with the information we put in during the wizard. You can put your company name, email, location, the various authorities down here, the data protection officer details in there, and then you can save and generate that policy if you want to. We're already using a privacy policy that I already had, so I'm not going to generate a new privacy policy for it. If you want to find out more information about GDPR and how you can expand the use of this plugin with some paid upgrades, in fact, then go over onto the support page and you'll find out lots of information there. This Privacy Manager is one of those paid upgrades that you can use. I'm not going to cover that in this because I don't think most of us are going to be using it. And then there is some advanced integration there with something called Classy Docs. And again, I'm not going to cover that. The final thing I want to show you with this plugin is to do with the contact form. I'm using contact form 7 and this plugin integrates nicely with it. But if you go to your contact form after you've installed the plugin, you don't see any checkbox requiring a check before they can submit the content. That's because we have to set that up, and we can set that up under consent. And once that loads, we need to create a new custom consent type. So click on Show Custom Types and then fill in a slug. And I've put contact form 7 dash. I'm going to copy that slug. I've also got a title and just a little description there. Once you've entered all that, just go down and click on Save. That will save all of your information. It doesn't look like it's saved it there, but if you open up that, you'll see that it has. Go over to Contact Forms and we're going to go in and edit the contact form. And then what we need to do is put in an acceptance button. So move your mouse to where you want it, click on acceptance, and then under the acceptance name, paste in the slug. And then what are you accepting? This is a little bit of information you can include with the checkbox. Whatever it is you want to put down there. And then just click on the insert and let's go up and save. Once you've saved it, we can go back to the contact form. In this lecture, I'd like to have a look at privacy policies because they're the main policy that you need to be GDPR compliant, and knowing what needs to go in there is the problem that most people face. For me, I'll always start off with the WordPress privacy policy generator and then add more content to it. That's the problem with all privacy policy generators. They can't be 100% correct for every site. They don't know which cookies are being set on your site, so you need to have a look. So if you start off with a privacy policy generator, and it is a good starting point, make sure you update it to include disclosures for all cookies that are being set on your site and all data that's being tracked. Also include a section in your privacy policy telling visitors how they can disable or delete cookies in their own browser. Now, if you're not sure what cookies are being set on your website, then there is this website here which you can go over to, and it's free to use. All you need to do is type in your domain name, click on the scan now, and it will go away and it will look to see which cookies are being set. Once it completes, the screen will scroll down a little bit and give you the scan results, and you can see here it's detected 7 cookies and 2 possible user tracking resources. You can click the little link show now or just scroll down a little bit. It will take you to the same place and show you the cookies. So I know we've got Google Analytics on there, so I need to include something about the cookies being set by Google Analytics. The best thing to do here is to go over to Google and do a search and search for cookies set with Google Analytics and see if you can find a little bit of information there about cookies and tracking and what they're being used for. The same goes for any of these other cookies. We've got Cloudflare as well. So I open up that one, we can see that there's a cookie here being set. We have other. I have no idea what that is. I'd have to do a bit of research to find that one. Cloudflare again, which is the same cookie being set. It's the same. Okay, that's the same, or looks the same. Yeah, and then we have Amazon advertising, and there's a cookie that's being set there, ad ID. All right, so we know which cookies are being set on the site, and these are tags that are being used. And it says up here, a legal basis is required for capturing personal data and for tracking user behavior. The following tags were loaded without any detectable opt-in consent. So we're serving adverts on here, and there's no obvious consent to say that we can use any information that we are grabbing from you as a visitor to show you personalized adverts or whatever. That's something, again, that should be in the privacy policy, but maybe if you're serving ads, you need to have a visual on the page somewhere as well saying that this website is using cookies to give you a better user experience. That's something that comes with the cookie pop-up that we saw, or the cookie consent pop-up that we saw in the previous video, getting consent for using cookies, and then we can show the advertising that's relevant. And again, we've got Google Analytics that is down here. So we now know what we've got to add to our privacy policy, but we need to start off with a privacy policy. So the first thing I would do is I'd start off with the one that WordPress generates. Go to Settings and Privacy. And you can, if you've already got a privacy policy that you're using, you can select that. But the whole point of this video is to show you how to come up with a privacy policy. So we're going to create a new page. And when you click the Create New Page button, WordPress will create a new page with a skeleton privacy policy there. At the very top, who are we? This is one of the important things you need to identify yourself in the privacy policy. And then what we've got down here is some more headings. The idea is that it will fill in the information that it can. So it's filled in information here about comments, but we would need to see what personal data we collect and why we collect it and insert something in there. To get a better idea of what to include each of the sections, open up this View Privacy Policy Guide. And once that loads, you'll see that there is detailed help for all of the different sections in there. If you look at that guide, under the Who Are We, it will say that you need the site URL as well as the name of your company or organization or the individual behind it, and some accurate contact information. So go down through each of these sections. We've got a section there we need to fill in for contact forms. We have cookie information. This is the information that WordPress knows about the cookies on your site. We have embedded content from other sites. We have a section on analytics where we already know from checking the cookies on the site that we have Google Analytics and cookies are being dropped. Who we share the data with, again, it's another section you're going to have to look for. How long we retain your data, again, that's based on the typical WordPress site. What rights you have over your data, where we send your data, and then we have a lot more information down here that you're going to need to fill in. These are just the headings. Your contact information, additional information, how we protect your data, what data breaches procedures we have in place, and so on. So that would be the starting point for my privacy policy. So I'm going to just publish that. In the previous video, we installed GDPR framework, and that also gave us a chance to create a privacy policy. If you go up to Tools, Data 443 GDPR, and click on the Privacy Policy tab, we didn't actually fill it in at the time because I already had a privacy policy, and that was the skeleton Google one. But now let's go in and create a privacy policy and see what this one comes up with. So I'm going to just fill in the details. United Kingdom. You can see as I put in United Kingdom as location, we have the Data Protection Authority, it filled in for us, Data Protection Authority email and the Data Protection Authority phone number. We will have a Data Protection Officer, which will be me because it's my website, and put my email. I would probably create a new email just for that, but that's all the information I have to do. It's fairly easy. And then just click on Save and Generate. And you can see now that this plugin has created a privacy policy for us as well, where we have information that wasn't in the one that WordPress generated for us. And so what I would do is I would go in and I would really merge the two so that the information from both privacy policies is included in my privacy policy, and use that as the basis. Of course, I'd still need to update it with information of cookies that are being set and that sort of thing. But that is how I would go about creating a privacy policy. Use the WordPress privacy policy generator, use the GDPR framework, take the two out, copy them, and then put them into a word processor and then just merge the two so they make sense. Once you've got your privacy policy completed, then do make sure you go in and put a link to it, perhaps in the footer of your website.